Whoops. Nope. Nope. Okay. Good morning. Hello. Welcome to, what day is it even today? Tuesday? It's March. It's getting lighter out when we wake up. That's nice, right? We can come here and it's light. Isn't that better? It's not better. Doesn't matter. Don't care. The world is all over anyway. What does it matter? You guys. There he is. How'd it go with the new girl?
With Jamie?
Yeah.
Oh, it's nice.
It's nice?
Yeah.
She has way more stuffies than me. She's got me beat in the stuffy department.
Nah, you're good.
I'm good?
Yeah.
Even without stuffed animals?
Yeah.
It's nice. It's nice of you to say. Thank you. Okay, so let's jump in. I just want to make sure I'm hang on. Just want to make sure I'm actually transmitting on the right thing. Oops. Oh yeah, okay. That's right. Oh, I see what's happened here. 1 second. Nope. It's got to go away. Has to go up. History 32. Okay. So, yesterday we were talking about the series of events that lead to the Russian Revolution. We said that, of course, things weren't going very well, and in February of 1917, the Tsar of Russia is convinced to step down, right? And so he abdicates the throne for both himself and his son Alexei, and Russia has to kind of refigure out its political situation, right? And so the Duma forms a provisional government, right? And we said provisional governments were temporary governments. They just existed for a short period of time. And basically one of their jobs, in addition to running the country and figuring out the war effort, is also to draft a new constitution, right? And the constitution is important because it kind of organizes the government of the, good morning, it organizes the government of the country, right? It tells you what the government is like. It says what the government can do and what it can't do. And so the provisional government is in the process of trying to draft this constitution, right? But unfortunately for this provisional government, and this is a bit of opinion here, but unfortunately for Russia, Lenin is going to come along, right? And he does have some public support, right? He has been preaching about peace, land, and bread to the peasants. He does have some support from the people, but he also has support from the Soviets, right? Those workers' councils that are operating in St. Petersburg and in Moscow and in other major Russian cities. And so he does have some support, but when there's a bit of kind of confusion in the government, Kerensky and Lvov are kind of fighting back and forth, he takes his moment and he seizes the government, right? He seizes government buildings, he seizes the Winter Palace by force with his Bolshevik Red Guard or Red Army, and he arrests the members of the provisional government, he throws them in jail, probably executes a few of them too, and this kind of makes him the new leader of Russia. And I pointed out to you that it's important to think about this because this really isn't a communist revolution, right? Marx said that communist revolutions happen from the bottom, right? The people realize that they're being exploited by the people on the top. They overthrow those people on the top, and then they take control of the factories of agriculture, of the means of production. They take control of it and they share the profits amongst themselves, right? And so the revolution comes from the bottom, it comes from the ground up. But here, that's not really what happened, right? This was a military, well, I guess he didn't really have the military, but this was an armed overthrow of the state. This was a coup d'etat, and the people who overthrew the state just happened to be communists, right? So this wasn't communism from the bottom, it was like communism from the top, right? Which is different, right? That's not exactly what Karl Marx said would happen, but Vladimir Lenin is going to make it happen, right? And in the article we read yesterday, you'll remember that he said, he didn't think the revolution was going to happen, right? He said to his wife, yeah, not in our lifetime, right? The people will not realize their state, they won't understand that they're being exploited, and they won't rise up and overthrow the ruling class. That won't happen. But sometime between when he told his wife that and October 25th, he made the decision that he was going to make it happen, right? He was going to make the revolution happen from above, right? Not from below. So we were reading this article yesterday, what if the Russian Revolution never happened? And it seemed to be a bit of a struggle to get some answers out of you guys. And I was just kind of curious, was it a difficult article to read? Or was everyone just kind of really like tired and bummed out yesterday? Or were they overwhelmed by midterms? Or like what was the deal? All of the above? What was it? Tired and bummed out? Yeah. Avi was so bummed out he wasn't here yesterday. David was tired yesterday.
What?
You were tired yesterday.
I'm tired?
You were tired yesterday. I woke you up in the student lounge. Said, David, wake up. You're gonna be late for school. Right? So maybe this is a difficult article to read. It was certainly written in kind of a somewhat flowery language, right? So it was a little more difficult to read. But again, sometimes it's okay to read something that's challenging, right? And we said that, or you told me yesterday, that the author kind of sees some echoes of Lenin in the modern world, right? We certainly see that there are countries that still practice either communism or kind of a version of it, right? And so Lenin bringing communism to the Soviet Union certainly influenced China and Vietnam and Cuba and North Korea and currently Venezuela, maybe even Peru, we'll see. I don't know if Castillo is a real socialist or not. I think he's just kind of a puppet bozo. Yeah. Yeah, there's governments that exist and that are communists that are directly related to Lenin's revolution, right? There are politicians out there who look up to Lenin as kind of a hero, right? Because Lenin, and we don't have a lot of time to get into him here, but he's kind of a ruthless fellow, right? He's very politically calculating. He doesn't mind spreading misinformation. He doesn't mind, smearing his opponents and saying awful things about them. He doesn't mind killing people to get what he wants either, right? What was the quote in the article? A revolution without firing squads is meaningless. Yikes. Although in V for Vendetta, V said something like that too, right? He said a revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having, right? So maybe he was kind of sort of quoting Lenin, but also not. So there's lots of echoes of Lenin and the October Revolution in the modern world, unfortunately, right? And he said that unlike what happened in Nazi Germany, Hitler might have been I'm going to start again. Hitler might have been an inevitability, right, or someone like him, but the author says here that actually this revolution was kind of unlikely to succeed, right? We said that Lenin almost got, well, he did get shot, right? could have died but didn't. We said that he had to overcome internal party resistance, right? Some of the Bolsheviks didn't want to overthrow the government. Some of them wanted to cooperate with the provisional government, and Lenin had to kind of convince them otherwise or push them aside, right? They said that, in the article, they said that really the ideal moment was when the Tsar stepped down, right? The Tsar stepped down. That was the moment to seize power. But where was Lenin? He wasn't even in Russia, right? I think was he in Switzerland? Is that what they said? He was in Switzerland. His second in command, Trotsky, was in New York. Joseph Stalin was still in Siberia, right? So nobody was really, that was the moment, right, to seize the government, but none of them were even there. They were all out of the country or too far away. So they kind of missed their opportunity, right? They tried to seize the government buildings, but it took them days to actually take them, right? Again, that's not what you want to do. If you're ever overthrowing a government, Regina, if you ever overthrow a government, you've got to do it quick, okay? You've got to cut all the lines of communication. You've got to get in there and arrest everyone. Make sure you grab the president or the leader. Don't let him get away. And you've got to make it happen quickly. We'll see this a little bit later when the communists try to overthrow the democratically elected government in the Soviet Union, but we'll get to that. If you're going to overthrow the government, you've got to do it fast, right? The longer it takes, the less likely you're going to succeed. And it takes them days. See, this is, Regina will use this when she overthrows the government in the future. You have to do it quick. And for the Bolsheviks, it took them days, right? And the longer it takes, the less likely it is that you're going to succeed in this, right? And so, and the other thing is that really there were a lot of opportunities for the government to fix what was wrong, right? People were unhappy in Russia for decades, right? The Romanov dynasty could have done something, right? The czars could have changed the way the country was run. The provisional government could have operated better as well, but there were all these chances to make changes, but nobody was able to fix the situation, right? And so it allowed people to continually be unhappy and protest, and finally we get someone who comes in and takes matters into his own hands, right? Now, hopefully you remember this one, but in what ways would the world be a totally different place without the Russian Revolution? If that never happened, if Lenin didn't succeed, how would the world be different now?
No Hitler.
No what?
No Hitler.
Why no Hitler?
It was said in the article.
Yeah? Do you remember why, though? Everybody always remembers Hitler.
I don't remember why.
You don't remember why? Don't remember why?
I don't know, it's just that without the Russian Revolution of 1917, Hitler would likely have ended up painting postcards
Right.
in one of the same flop house where he started.
Yeah. So he, like other political leaders of the time, had a pretty intense fear of communism, of Bolshevism, right? Lots of people in Europe looked at Russia and was like, oh gosh, the communists have won, right? They have taken over the government and now they're imposing communism. We don't want that, right? We're scared, right? And so Hitler, one of the things Hitler did was he stoked people's fears about communism, right? And he combined them with people's fear of the Jewish people, right? He said there was a Jewish Bolshevism, right? Which was kind of two enemies combined into one. But he and a lot of other governments in Europe were really frightened of a communist revolution, just like Russia had, right? So Hitler was able to use that to his advantage, right? And so, is it true that with no Russian Revolution we'd have no Hitler? Maybe. We'll never know, right? Interesting to think about, though. How else would the world be different? No Russian Revolution? Avi, what do you think?
Russia wouldn't be as powerful as it is right now.
Perhaps not, right? Russia might not have turned out to be such a powerful country. That's reasonable to say. What leads you to think that?
It just leaves.
It just what?
It just leaves.
It just leaves?
Yeah.
Like the planet?
No. Like they weren't as powerful before, but like after the revolution, they changed to make themselves better, you know.
Okay.
Or,
Certainly, yeah, and we'll talk about that maybe today and tomorrow, how Joseph Stalin takes them from kind of a backwards, poor farming country to an industrial power, right? So yeah, maybe that wouldn't have been how the Soviet Union developed, right? Maybe it would have been different, right? No Lenin, no Stalin, right? What do you think, Anna?
Maybe like something connected with no Hitler would have been like they would not be that powerful like war-wise. You know, like they maybe wouldn't create any kind of nuclear weapon.
Okay, maybe they wouldn't have wound up being a nuclear power, right? Why were they a nuclear power? Why did the Russians develop nuclear weapons? Because what? At-
Because is it because of the atomic bomb in World War II in the Pacific War?
Yeah, right. The Americans developed atomic weapons, and so the Russians knew that they had to develop them as well, right? Because the U.S. and the USSR were in opposition, right? There was a Cold War, but with no Russian Revolution, with no communist Soviet Union, no Cold War, right? What does the world look like? What if Hitler never came to power? What if there was no World War II? What if there was no Cold War?
Maybe we wouldn't be as industrialized as now.
Yeah, and without Soviet Union, China doesn't become a communist country, right? Mao relies on a lot of support from Soviet Union. No Soviet Union, no communist China, no communist Vietnam, right? Once you remove this event from the history of the 20th century, there's almost nothing left. Like, it's hard to know what the world would have looked like because it affected so many things, right? What would our history be like with no World War II and no Cold War? I can't even imagine, because it's too big, right? It's just too significant. Last question here has to do with our good friend Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, they said here that this article was written on the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. So it was written in 2017. And what they were saying was, lots of people were talking about the Russian Revolution, right? They were writing articles. This article was part of a series of articles called Red Century, I think, where they were talking about the significance of the Russian Revolution. But interestingly, if you looked in Russia, nobody was saying anything about it. There was no celebration or talk at all about the 100th anniversary of the Russian Revolution. And why is that? If it's so significant, if we can't even imagine the 20th century without this event, and yet Russia, where it all happened, they're not paying attention to its anniversary? Why not? What did they say? Why is Russia not paying attention to this? Don't know? Okay, so the article tells us that okay, here's how I'll start this. Every country tells itself a story about who it is. Okay? So just like us, right? Our identities are built on a story about who we think we are, right? And we base that story on where we come from and who our parents are and what our upbringing was like and the things that we have done or experienced in our lives. We build this kind of story about who we are, right? And countries have to do the same thing. Countries have to build a story about who they are to kind of help unite people, right? And give people kind of a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose. And you probably all know that your country has such a story, right? There's a story about who your country is and what it's been through and what it means. And Russia, of course, has the same thing, but the government, of course, is heavily involved in creating this story and maintaining it, right? But this is kind of a tricky episode in the story of Russia because what's the story? Well, the story is that it's about the overthrow of a government, right? It's a revolution, right? There's a monarchy, and then even though the Tsar steps down, there's a monarchy, and then it's overthrown by revolutionaries who take control by force, right? And the problem here is that that's kind of who Vladimir Putin has become, right? He's not really a prime minister or a democratic leader. He's almost made himself into a modern day czar, right? He has a democratic government around him, but it's not really a democracy, right? Russia operates by what he says. And so does he really want to tell the Russian citizens a story about revolutions where the czar gets overthrown? No, because now he's the czar, right? He's the monarch, he's the king. He doesn't want to tell people a story about how the king gets overthrown. That doesn't work for him, right? And so when the anniversary for this event comes up, nobody says anything, right? Because he doesn't want to talk about that. That's not an inspiring story for him. It doesn't suit his purposes. He'd much rather talk about Joseph Stalin, right? Because Joseph Stalin was a strong man, a tough guy who kind of made the Soviet Union into an industrial and a world superpower, right? That's kind of the story he wants to tell, right? One man in control, making the country great, right? That's who he wants to compare himself to. He doesn't want to tell the story of Lenin where someone like him gets thrown out and the people take control. That's not what he wants, right? So again, we've talked about this too, is that history is all about choosing what people and events are part of the story, right? And if you choose different events, you tell a different story, right? So is this event significant? Huge, right? I almost can't think of another event that's as important as this one in the 20th century. But is it important to the story that Putin wants to tell? No, it doesn't work for him, right? It sends the wrong message, right? So he's going to ignore it, right? And he's going to celebrate other aspects of Russian history, right? He's going to celebrate the czars, right? He's going to celebrate guys like Joseph Stalin. He's going to celebrate military victories like the one over the Nazis in 1945, right? That's the story he wants to tell. A strong Russia with a strong leader at the top, right? That's the story he wants to tell because that's who he is, or that's who he wants people to think he is. Right? So again, historical significance has to do kind of with the story you're trying to tell. And if you're trying to tell the story of the 20th century, I don't think you can tell it without this event. But if you're trying to tell your country a story that legitimizes your power, you're going to leave this one out because it doesn't help you, right? it's not a good part of your argument, unfortunately. Okay, cool? All right. So, okay, I've got a little more for you to read. Is it a little more or a lot? It's a little more. Is it a lot? Let me look. 75. Oh, 70. Okay. Let me see. Oh no, there's 2 pages in there you don't have to read. There's almost 4 pages in there you don't have to read. It's not that much. There's a lot of purple and green. It's not bad, I promise. Regina's like, you promised before, and you lied. Okay. So I'll let you read this section of the textbook. I'm just going to put this into Microsoft Teams for our online folks. I'll give you some time to read, and then we'll talk. Okay. Let's see. No. There we go. Okay. Those pages are in Microsoft Teams for you online people. So yeah, let's read and see what we see here. Is a couple more minutes okay, guys? Yeah? Okie dokie. So, hopefully we're ready. No? 2 more minutes? 2 more minutes? Okay. 2 more minutes it is. Then I desperately want to hear all of your answers. I do. Especially now that I had to give up my first class and I miss everybody in it. So now I'm gonna be like needier with you guys. Like I'm gonna smother you with love, and then you guys will be like, oh, enough. But I have to deal with the loss somehow, you know? Okay. So let's start with the first question here. So there's kind of a lot going on here. So Lenin has managed to take control of the government. He's arrested members of the provisional government, thrown them in jail, and made himself the leader of Russia. And one of the first things he's going to try to do is he's going to try to nationalize agriculture. Now, what on earth does that mean, to nationalize agriculture? To sell it? No, not quite. Not quite. What does it mean to nationalize it? Regina's looking it up. What do you think, Anna?
Maybe to make it for everyone, and I'm sure I can probably so it's not going to be just for me, if people like want to sell it.
Okay.
It's gonna be for the whole.
So he's going to make it for the whole nation? Okay. Regina, what do you have there?
Making private, making like controlled by the government.
Yeah. So yeah, you're both right? So he's going to. So before, we know that land and agriculture belonged to the nobles, right? The dukes and duchesses and whatever that were around in Russia at the time. They owned the land. Now remember, when Lenin was trying to get support, he promised land to the people, right? He said that he would redistribute the land to the people. And here, what he's saying is, I'm going to nationalize it, right? I'm going to make it under the control of the country, under the control of the state, under control of the government. Now I ask you, is that really what he promised? Or do you think that's what the peasants thought he was promising? Anna's shaking her head. What are you thinking over there, Anna?
I think they actually thought he was going to give them lands.
Yeah, right? So the peasants probably thought, oh, we're going to get our own land, right? I'm going to get my own farmland. It'll be mine. I'll be able to farm it. It'll be just great. But whoops, right? There seems to have been some confusion here. Lenin's going to give the land to the people, but it's going to belong to everybody. It's going to belong to the state, right? So the peasants kind of got a little bait and switch here, right? They didn't own their own land before because it belonged to the nobles. Now they don't own their own land either because it belongs to the state, right? So things are kind of not really any different for the peasants than they started out, right? They didn't own their land then, and they don't own their land now. Whoops, right? Clearly, Lenin was promising them something that either they didn't understand or that he didn't go to any trouble to explain to them, but they're not really getting what they thought they were going to get, right? How does this process go? How does this nationalization thing go? Avi, what do we hear about? How does the nationalization process go? Like, what are the results of this nationalization?
So there were food shortages and all.
There were what?
There were food shortages and strikes
Okay.
in factories and all, and that's why it gets business.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay. So, actually, let's back it up. Why did he want to nationalize agriculture in the first place? What was the point of that? Maybe David, help me out here. Why did he want to nationalize agriculture? Okay. So yeah, definitely the plan is to generate enough food to feed these people, right? Because we've been having food shortages for quite some time, so we want to feed them. How does nationalization make that happen? How does it allow us to feed more people?
Like everybody is given the right amount of food.
Okay.
Distributed equally.
Okay. So the government is going to take control of food distribution, right?
Yeah.
That's part of it, for sure. Why else might they, how is it going to help them to nationalize agriculture? They use the term, in the book they use the term economies of scale. Does anyone know what that means? An economy of scale? Basically what it means is that the bigger something gets, kind of the more efficient it can be, right? So think about, for example, if I own a grocery store, okay? I own a grocery store and I've got to pay someone to work in it, right? A cashier, I've got to pay someone to stock the shelves. I've got to pay someone to do the accounting, right? And the payroll and the taxes and stuff like that. I've got to pay someone to advertise and do my marketing, right? I've got to do all those things to run the store. And after I've, sold all my food and I've paid all those people, then I get the profit that's left over, right? Now, if I open a second store somewhere else in town, I still have to hire another cashier and another person to stock the shelves, right? But can the same person do my payroll and my accounting and my taxes? Yeah. Can the same person do my marketing and my advertising? Yeah. So there's a bit of an economy of scale, right? I get kind of a 2-for-1 deal because the person I've hired to do those things can do it for 2 stores. Do you think they can do it for 3 stores? Maybe, right? And so the bigger this thing gets, the more efficient it's going to become, right? Because I don't have to hire an accountant for every store. I can have one accountant that takes care of a bunch of stores, right? And the bigger that my chain gets, right, the more stores I open, my distributors, the people who sell me the food, they're going to give me a better price, right? The more I order from them, if I order 5 crates of oranges, they'll give me one price. If I order 100 crates of oranges, they're going to give me even better price, and I'm going to make more money, right? So the bigger that my thing gets, the more efficient it becomes because I don't have to hire, every single position for every single store. And I'm going to get better prices the bigger things are, right? And that's why places like Walmart do so well. Walmart is gigantic, right? But there's an economy of scale there. They can be more efficient and they can get better prices from their suppliers than anyone else can. So if I open my own little department store, there's no way I can compete with Walmart, right? I'm never going to have prices that low because I can't buy the stuff for as cheap as they can buy it. And I've got to pay for all those things myself in one store that they have, they have people that will take care of all their stores, right? And so here Lenin's going to try and do the same thing. Instead of every farmer just kind of doing their own thing on their own time, he's going to collectivize these farms. He's going to put 100 farms together into one, and he's going to get people to work together on them, almost like in a factory. And the idea, of course, is that it's going to be more efficient, right? It's going to be less work, and hopefully it's going to mean more agricultural produce, right? More output, less hunger, right? Does that really work? Does that happen? Is the Soviet Union finally able to feed itself? No, it doesn't work. How did the peasants respond to this nationalization of agriculture? Are they like, yes, nationalization. This is so boss. Well, they probably didn't say that, but did they go along with it? Did they like it? They did not, right? Again, they didn't really want this, right? They thought they were going to get their own land. They didn't. They thought they were going to be able to, grow their own food and then sell it on the market for a profit. But what do they get to do? They get to hand it over to the government, and the government will give them back what they need, right? Is that really what the peasants were looking for? No. Do they really like it? No, right? And so in the first few years, we see people are actually selling food on the black market. They don't want to hand their harvest over to the government. They want to sell it and make money, right? So here's Lenin trying to get people to do communism, and here the people are doing capitalism, right? They're selling their goods for a profit, right? So yeah, the first stage doesn't really go well, right? And again, that shouldn't be surprising because the communism didn't come from the bottom, right? The people didn't really want it. They got it, right? They got a communist party in power, and now the Communist Party is going to try and impose communism on them. But of course, they're not super into it, right? And initially, it doesn't really go well. That's what's going to cause Lenin to create the new economic policy. But that is what we'll deal with after the break. Okay, so let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll deal with new economic policy. Okay, here we go. So, Lenin has nationalized agriculture, right? The peasants are not on board with this, right? They wanted their own land and they wanted to sell it on the market for a profit. And Lenin is like, oh, it's your land. We all own it somehow, right? And the peasants are not, again, they're not cool with that. They don't really like handing over their harvest to the government. They try to sell their produce on the black market. And so things are not really going very well initially, right? The communism is not really embraced by the peasants because, again, they didn't really want it to begin with, right? But now they have it. But there's also a civil war going on, right? So we have the Bolsheviks, right, who are Lenin's party that are now in power. They're kind of the communist party in Russia. And who are they fighting against? Regina, who are they fighting against? The Bolsheviks in the Civil War. The Red Army. Who are they fighting against? Well, Trotsky's in there too, right? He's a Bolshevik. Yeah. Excellent military commander, Leon Trotsky. Nikolai who? No, he's not part of this yet. Bukharin? No, Bukharin's not part of this yet. There's... What do you got there, David? Where are you? What page are you on?
This happens before Lenin's death.
Yes, happens before Lenin's death. So it's basically, it's kind of on really quite quickly, right? Because Lenin takes control of the government, and there's actually lots of people who aren't in favor of this, right? Lenin has some support, but he doesn't have the support of all, right? So once he and his Bolsheviks get into power, there are people who want to kick him out, right? And so this is kind of what we call the White Army, right? So the Bolsheviks are the Red Army, the White Army opposes them, and who's in the White Army? What's the White Army composed of? Let's see. Who's in the White Army? Oh. Does it actually say that? I could have sworn. Oh yeah, okay, it's on page 75. Who is it? Oh. Okay. Okay, you guys are killing me here today. Okay, I'm gonna help you out. So, the White Army is kind of basically all the people who are against the Bolsheviks, and there's lots of them, right? So there are monarchists or czarists, right? People who want the czar back in power. There are constitutional democrats, right? There are people who want democracy and they want to get rid of the Bolsheviks. There are foreign powers involved, right? The British and the French have some people in there as well because foreign powers don't want the Bolsheviks taking power either, right? There's also some far-right fascisty kind of people. They're involved in there as well. So this White Army is kind of a collection of everyone who's not the Bolsheviks, right? And again, they all have different goals and different aims, right? Some people want the Tsar back. Some people don't want the Tsar back. They want democracy. Some people are fascists. Some people are foreigners who just want to kick the Bolsheviks out and they don't care what happens after that as long as they don't have communism, right? So everybody's kind of mixed in there together fighting the Bolsheviks, right? And as a result, they don't really do very well, right? Because again, Leon Trotsky is a brilliant military strategist, right? So he's very good at commanding the Red Army. But also the White Army is kind of disorganized. They can't really agree on anything, right? Because they don't even agree on what political system they want, right? They're all fighting the Bolsheviks, but if they win, they all want something different to happen after, right? So they're not really cooperating very well. And to make it worse, the peasants don't like the White Army either. They're not huge fans of the Bolsheviks, but because there are British and French and other people mixed into it, they feel that, oh, foreigners are in our country trying to like manipulate our political system. We don't really like that. And so the White Army doesn't really have the support of the people either. And so the war goes on for a few years, but ultimately the Red Army, the Bolsheviks, are going to be successful, right? They're going to defeat this White Army. Okay, that brings us to new economic policy. What is it? What's this new economic policy? Brought in by Lenin. Right. Right. So what does that mean kind of in your own words there, Regina? What does that mean in your own words? Lenin's trying to put into place communism here, but what's he going to do? He's going to back off a bit, and he's going to add in a bit of, starts with a C. Sorry. I'm trying to help you, but I'm not being very helpful, I guess. He's gonna add in a little bit of capitalism, right? He's gonna say, oh, okay, you can actually sell your goods on the market and you can keep some of the profit, right? You have to give a bunch of it to the state, but if there's any left over, you can sell it and keep the money, right? You can have small businesses and you can operate them for profit, right? That's not really a communist thing, right? Communism is where, I guess I should say socialism, that's more accurate. Socialism is where the government owns all enterprises, all businesses, right? There's no real, money for profit kind of thing. But Lenin is like, okay, the peasants aren't really embracing communism. We'll just give a little bit of capitalism. We'll let people keep a bit of their profits just to kind of get the economy going, right? Because again, he's going to try and put communism into place, and the peasants basically dig in their heels, right? And they're like, no, we're not doing this, right? We're not giving you our harvest. You want to take our animals, we'd rather kill them all first. And that's not really good for the economy, right? Lenin actually needs people to produce things, and he needs them to make it into circulation so people can actually eat, right? And so when the peasants don't embrace communism or socialism, he adds in a little bit of a little bit of capitalism just to get people working again, right? Just to get them growing food and getting it into the hands of people who can eat it, right? It's not really where he wants to go, but it's kind of a halfway point, right? It's just, okay, we're not going to jump into the pool of socialism. We're just going to put our foot in, right? And we're going to ease in slowly. Right? But then, of course, he's going to die, right? So Lenin's going to have a series of strokes, I think. The first one will kind of, knock him out of the public eye a little bit. But after he has a few more, he kind of becomes incapable of leading the party. And he's going to he's going to die, right? And then the party will have to find itself a new leader. And there's kind of three there's kind of a power struggle that goes on, and there's three kind of positions within the party. And so, Anna, what's one kind of position within the Communist Party? Okay. There's a left wing and a right wing and a center. All right. So Regina, give me one of those things. Okay. Who's out on the left? Right. So Leon Trotsky is pushing for leadership of the party, and what does he believe in? What does he think should happen? What does he think should happen?
Before the economic policy of the betrayal of communism.
Right. So Trotsky's a hardcore communist, right? He sees this new economic policy that's betraying socialism, right? He wants hardcore, pure communism. What else is he in favor of? Or what does he hope will happen? Yeah, so he kind of thinks that there's this idea that for socialism or for communism to be successful in Russia, other places are going to have a communist revolution as well, right? So Trotsky's hoping for worldwide revolution, right? Everybody will see that they're exploited, everybody will overthrow the people on top, and everybody will switch to socialism or communism. And he thinks that they need this to happen in order for Russia to be successful with its communism or its socialism. Okay? So again, he's pretty hardcore, right? Trotsky's pretty hardcore. Now, who's out on the right? Nikolai Bukharin is his name. Bukharin is out there. And what does Bukharin think?
He thinks the policy is good.
Yeah, right? He thinks new economic policy is like, okay, not pure communism, but, baby steps, right? We'll get there. What does he think about that worldwide revolution thing?
Do you agree with that? But it's ultimately essential, but they really didn't feel the sense of urgency as in others.
Yeah, so they think, yeah, that'd be nice if that happened eventually, right? It'll get there. We're good, right? And then there's somebody in the center. Who's in the center? Right, Joseph Stalin's in the center. And what's his kind of approach, or what's his idea?
So one is socialism.
What's that?
Socialism.
What about socialism?
I think he wants to just focus it inside the country first, and then inspire to spread the ideology by actually putting it in the country first.
Yeah, right. So he is kind of a compromise of the left and the right, right? He's saying that, yeah, it'd be great if we have this worldwide revolution, but we don't need it to happen, right? We're going to build pure communism, pure socialism in this country, right? And yeah, like Regina mentioned, then we can be an inspiration or a model for other countries, right? And so he's kind of a mix of the two sides, right? And as you read about here, he's the one who's going to be successful, right? He's going to push his opponents out of the Politburo, right, which is kind of like the party, the Communist Party. He's going to push them out. Later on, he's going to have Trotsky not executed, but assassinated, which, as we'll find out, Stalin's not a super nice guy. they said something about, this is the last thing I'll say, they said something about Stalin being Machiavellian. Do you know what that means? Do you remember reading that? It's a big fancy word. They said, yeah, his Machiavellian power politics. What does that mean, Machiavellian? Do you know what it means? Have you heard it before? This term comes from, or it's described, it's become an adjective, but it has to do with a writer during, I think, the Renaissance called Niccolo Machiavelli, right? And Machiavelli wrote, I think he wrote a number of things, but his famous book is called The Prince. And in The Prince, he tells you how to be a good leader, okay? But he doesn't tell you how to be a good, moral, just, righteous leader. He tells you how to hold on to power, okay? And you do it by, whatever you need to do to hold on to power, that's what a good leader does. And so he teaches you all kinds of tricks in the book to be a good leader by just hanging on to power. And you do whatever you have to in order to make that happen, right? So, for instance, maybe you take over and you're worried that a certain part of your country doesn't like you. And so you put someone in charge of that area who's really awful, okay? They're really awful to the people and brutal. And then you wait, you hear about it, and then you come to the rescue, you take that guy out of power, you cut his head off in the public square, and you say, I'm so sorry, people, but I have taken care of this guy, and then the people will love you, right? So you sacrifice that guy in order to make yourself look like the hero, right? And he has all these little stories throughout the book of how you can maintain power by sort of scheming your way through it, right? Or making yourself look better. And so, yeah, Stalin is kind of like that. And I think Lenin was too, right? They both would do whatever they had to do, say whatever they had to say, and kill whoever they had to kill in order to be powerful, right? But again, when you hear Machiavellian, that's what they're talking about, is someone who will do whatever they need to do in order to gain or maintain power. And it comes from the book. And I think if you wanted to read it, it's a free download, I think. If you go to like the iTunes bookstore, I think it's a free download, and it's not a very long book either. So if you're interested in how to become a leader so you can overthrow the government, then it might be worth a read. Okay, that's all I have for you today, good people. So I'll let you pack it up. I hope you have a nice afternoon, and I'll see you tomorrow, okay? All right.